Welcome back, guys, to another long form video. In today's video, we are answering a question that one of our subscribers or one of you guys had asked, which is how do you file a flight plan? So in today's video, I'm going to answer the question, how do you file a VFR flight plan? You have two types of flight plans. You have a VFR and you have an IFR. Just to go into further detail, VFR is related to visual flight rules. And then, of course, the IFR is related to the instrument flight rules. So now, let's get into it. So this is our typical flight plan. This is an Akayo-based flight plan. And South African Civil Aviation Authority, or the ATNS, have adopted it into their own form, as in added their own brand into it. They have detailed their phone numbers that you can call in order to file a flight plan. So you've got two phone numbers over here. You've got 0860359669, and then you've also got 011-928-6518. If you are unable to reach them on their telephone number, then you can actually register yourself with file2fly.atns.co.za. It is a website where you should register 24 hours before you want to go fly, because it may take some time before they actually activate your account. So once your account is activated, then you can proceed to log in, and then you can file a flight plan through there. The form is pretty much the same on File to Fly. You just have to be very particular in the way that you fill in the form, otherwise they will reject it. Today we'll only focus upon how to file through a telephone number, and that is initially filling in the form that we have here present, and then calling them and then filing the flight plan. If you want to know more on the File to Fly system, well, we can make a video on that on another day. You just let me know in the comment section below. Okay, so now the flight plans, this is how it looks like. The first section that you should care about is the section starting from number 3, or this section over here. Anything above that, you do not have to worry. I believe that is where the filer themselves would actually fill that in. So starting off actually with number 7. Number 7, it says the aircraft identification. The most common way that one would fill that in is putting in the registration of the aircraft. So let's say, for example, you have Zulu Sierra Alpha Bravo Charlie. You would therefore put Zulu Sierra Alpha Bravo Charlie here, or you would put Zulu Uniform Alpha Bravo Charlie for experimental aircraft. And then, but there are actually other forms of putting in aircraft identification. You can even request for a special call sign that you would put under remarks in another section. However, like I said, the most common way and the most simplest way is just to put the registration of the airplane. Okay, good. So now we go on to flight rules. Now, flight rules, you have two types. You have Victor and you have India. Victor, of course, being the VFR rules, visual flight rules, and then India being your instrument flight rules. And then now if we go to type of flight, this where it becomes a little bit more in depth. You've got 3 different options to put in. You either have Golf, November, or Sierra, or Mike. So Mike is for military. If you're a civilian and you're flying civilian aircraft, it would not be the case that you'd put military. What would be interesting is actually police helicopters or police aircraft. I wonder what they put in there. I wonder if they put in military, or if they put in G for general. So that's what G stands for. It's general aviation. The Golf stands for general aviation. November stands for non-scheduled flights, and then Sierra stands for scheduled flights. So non-scheduled being your charter flights. That is your Part 135 operators, and then of course scheduled would tend to be your Part 121 operators. Okay, so your Part 135 operators could actually also have scheduled flights. It's just that they have a small operation. Okay, now let's go to number 9, where it just says number on it. A number is just a number of aircraft that are grouped together. So, for example, if you're doing a formation flight, you can say there are 2 aircraft together, or there are 3 aircraft together, right? And you're the lead aircraft. So, in this instance, we'd put 1 because it's only one of us. Then we go to type of aircraft. Now, a KAIO or a KO has a list of codes that they would use for to categorize an aircraft. So, for example, a Cessna 172 would be a Charlie 172. A Piper Cherokee would be a Papa 28 Alpha. And then a Diamond 20 would be a Delta Victor 20. I found that out today when I was actually editing a video. I think it also goes by a Delta Alpha 20, but Delta Victor. That was when I was flying in Johannesburg Information North, and then they said to another aircraft, you have a Delta Victor 20 to your whatever clock position. So I found that interesting. Okay, now next you have your wake turbulence. Now your wake turbulence is divided into 3 parts. You've got light, medium, and heavy. You are a light aircraft if you're less than 7,000 kg. In terms of anything beyond that, I can't quite remember, but I think heavy starts from 158,000 kg, or 158 tons, which is quite a lot. That's a very heavy plane. And of course, that would be your Airbus A380 aircraft. And I imagine the Boeing 747 would also fit into that category, particularly the cargo variant or the 747 800. 800? Yes, I'm not sure. Moving on. So now we go on to equipment. This is where a lot of people can get confused. For your typical VFR flights, you would most likely write Victor, Zulu, / that is very important to put, / Charlie, or you would put Victor / Charlie. Now the Victor represents VHF communications. The Zulu represents an item that you're going to put in the remarks section, which is going to most likely be a GPS. The / and then Charlie. The Charlie represents the type of transponder that you have on board, if you have any. If you have no transponder on board, you would put November, but if you do have one, it could either be Alpha, Charlie, or Sierra. Alpha being it will only indicate your transponder code on the radar screen. If you have mode Charlie, then that would indicate not only the transponder code but also your altitude towards the radio controller. And then lastly, mode Sierra. I'm not quite sure about the details of mode Sierra, but what I am aware of them is if you have a mode Sierra transponder, if 2 aircraft have mode Sierra transponder, then they should be able to and have TCAS on board. Then the TCAS will be able to provide not only TA traffic advisory, but also an RA revolution advisory. For those of you more in the know, you can please correct me. I am a humble person. I'm always learning. I always enjoy learning. So if you know any more particulars of those details, you will let me know. Excellent. Good. So that's Victor, Zulu, Charlie. And then I also said you can have Victor, Sierra. Yeah, you can have Sierra. Well, you in a VFR flight, you typically not have Sierra. Oh yeah, so I said Victor Charlie or Victor Zulu Charlie. If you have Sierra, then you have standardized instrument equipment on board. You can do a VOR approach and ILS approach, and then you have VHF comms as well on board. That would be fantastic. If you have ADF on board, then you can put F, which would be you could put Victor Foxtrot / Charlie, Foxtrot being the ADF. But of course, ADF NDB is slowly being phased out of South Africa. It's been completely phased out of North America at this point in time. All right, good. So that's number 10. Now, if we go to number 13, which is the departure aerodrome, Oh yes, guys, I'm using Paint because it was the most straightforward software that I could get out. If you if you have a recommendation for another software, you can also let me know. But let's get into it. So number 13, departure aerodrome. Now departure aerodrome, you'll be using. Let me actually get out a pencil. I'm going to get a pencil here. So a departure aerodrome, right? You would put in the ICAO code into there. So, for example, let's say for Vonderboom, you have Foxtrot Alpha Whiskey Bravo. Excellent. And then your time has to be in Zulu time. Okay, it has to be in Zulu time. So let's say you'd be departing 0700 Zulu time, which would be 0900 local time. Great. Then we go on to number 15, which is a cruising speed. You can either put your cruising speed in TAS. It's a TAS speed. It's not your indicated airspeed speed. It's a TAS speed. Or you can put it in Mach numbers. That's if your aircraft does go as fast as the Mach airspeed, or requires or needs to use the Mach airspeed. In this instance, for most training aircraft or for most private owner aircraft, then you would not be using Mach. You would be using TAS. So you'd put in there, and actually let me just put an example just on the left hand side. You'd put, for example, like November 0100, right? So you'll be flying a TAS of 100 knots, but of course your ground speed may differ depending on the wind direction. And in reality, your ground speed would most likely vary between 90 knots, perhaps even 85 knots in your typical trainer aircraft, all the way up to 100 knots, possibly 110 knots, possibly. Okay, good. So that will be your cruising speed. And in terms of your level, note, guys, this level is your initial altitude or flight level that you're going to be climbing to. Your initial, right? Okay. Good. So if it's an altitude, you'd put alpha 065, for example. So alpha 065 would go over here. Alpha 065. Or if it's a flight level, you would put Foxtrot. So F Foxtrot 065, right? Okay. Now in terms of your routing, so in terms of your routing, you would initially put direct and you would put DCT. So DCT, we've got DCT, and then you would put your initial exit point if you're flying, when you're flying out of an air traffic, if you are flying out of a control zone, then you put your initial exit point, whatever that may be. Let us think about. Well, okay, so if you're flying out of Vonderboom, for example, then your initial exit point to the west would be Roslyn. You would then therefore put in the coordinates of Roslyn. I do not know them off the top of my head. I'm just going to put 234050 south, just for our sake, and then east, whatever it may be, 280000, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. Okay, good. So that would be the initial exit point from the control zone, and then you would say at that point in time, if you're going to be changing your altitude to whatever it is, then you would have to put in the speed once again. So November 0100, and then Foxtrot 0 Alpha 070, for example. And this is in relation to Johannesburg Special Rules area. And then you'd basically do that for every single turning point that you have, or airport that you're going to be going to, just to do a touch and go. So, for example, let's say you're going direct to Pilanesberg, so Foxtrot Alpha Papa November thereafter. But you wouldn't say direct Foxtrot Alpha Papa November. You would say direct to the coordinates of which you'll be entering the ATZ of Pilanesberg, and then you would say direct Foxtrot Alpha Papa November, right? Okay, makes sense. Good. Then thereafter we have, I'm just going to leave that there. We have the destination aerodrome number 16. So let's say our destination aerodrome is going to be Lanceria, so Foxtrot Alpha Lima Alpha. You would put your total estimated en route time, so the time from departure to top of descent, or yes, to top of descent. So basically, it's your flight time. How long is your flight time going to be? And then also obviously take into account a little bit, give it a little bit of a buffer, because you may underestimate it, and then that could also mess up. That would now give an advanced alert to the search and rescue division, which is something that we would not want to happen. Then you have your alternate. So what do I mean by that? Let's be particular with the estimated en route time. So now let's say your startup taxi and takeoff is 15 minutes. Great. And then obviously you've got the climb out phase, which takes a little bit longer. Your speed is a little bit slower than in your cruise phase, so you're going to take that into consideration. And then you've got your cruise, which is your cruise, and then you've got your descent, approach, and then landing, right? So with all of that, that all takes time. So even if it'll say from takeoff to overhead the airport or the entry point of the control zone is an hour and a half, you got to take into account all of that other time. So add that other time into it, and then that will give you a nice safety margin. That will give AT&S a nice safety margin, realistic figure, of your actual EET. And then alternate aerodrome, in terms of alternate aerodrome, it's your alternate destination aerodrome at the PPL level. That is all that you require. At the CPL level, you do require a departure alternate as well as an arrival alternate. You may also even have a en route alternate too. The en route alternate would not be stipulated or stated over in the flight plan. As you can see, they've only given space for two. So you can have a departure alternate. You can have even two destination alternates if you so wish. More safety. Okay, so then we go on to other information. Other information is where you put in the operator's details. So you just say OPR, the operator, the name of the operator, as well as the telephone number. You would then put in also cell phone number on board. They ask that quite often. What's the cell phone number on board? They ask for it because if you do have an accident, touch wood, if you do have an accident, then they could also try to call you on that particular number. Or if you have landed and you've forgotten to close your flight plan, which is what happens more often than we prefer. Well, we don't prefer actually, but it happens more often, and they call your number to say, hey, you need to you alive? Yes. Okay, we're canceling your search and rescue at this time. Excellent, good, thank you, bye. Okay, then the other thing that you would put in there is if you require any training assignments. So, for example, doing a touch and go at a certain airport, we have put in Pilanesberg here as, let's say, it's a turning point, so to speak. So you'd want to put in remarks, RMK / over here, touch and go. And then if you're for search and rescue, if you are not departing from a controlled airport and returning back to a controlled airport, or going to a controlled airport, then then obviously your search and rescue is going to be normal in that instance. But if you're not returning to any one of those airports, then you could request to cancel your search and rescue with FAOR, which is OR Tamban Airport. So you can say, I'll cancel with FAOR plus 1 hour my estimated arrival time to my destination, or I will cancel with any particular nearby controlled aerodrome, right? So let's say you're going to Bloemfontein, or you're going to New Tempe in Bloemfontein, which is unmanned. However, next to it you have Bram Fischer International Airport, which is a manned airport. It's a towered airport. So you could call up the tower and say, hey, I've landed, please cancel my search and rescue, right? Great. So moving on to endurance, number 19. Number 19, you can put in. So the endurance is how many hours is that engine going to run for? Simply put, you could be very new. I would advise to be nuanced with the calculation in the sense that how much fuel are you going to use for your taxi, run up, takeoff. Takeoff is going to use a lot of fuel because you're going to be typically using full power. Again, this is in the trainer environment, not in your multi-piston environment or in your turbine environment where you don't necessarily or you wouldn't necessarily have to use full power to actually enter into the climb. But however, in this instance, if you're trainer aircraft, if you're single engine piston, then you'll be using full power to climb, and in doing so, that uses up more fuel than as per normal. Then you would calculate your fuel usage on the trip fuel, so the cruise at the altitude or altitudes that you're flying at. Then which you would reference the POH to get that information. And then what else is there? Yeah, then you go on to the persons on board, how many people are on board, good. Emergency radios, if you have an ELT, VHF, and UHF. That's actually a very good question. I actually have to look into the UHF and VHF emergency radios. But what I am aware is of your ELT, which is the emergency locator transponder, I believe, or otherwise known as emergency locator beacon, which is very useful to have on board if you do have an incident or an emergency. Survival equipment. This is more useful if you're going international. I would say very long cross country. If you're going above overhead oceans or an ocean, then this is going to become very important. The jackets and the dinghies, that is, right? But typically for your domestic flights, training flights, you would not be using jackets or dinghies or any form of survival equipment, as a matter of fact. So we would put an X on all of those. You just put an X on S, Sierra, under survival equipment, X on J, Juliet, for jackets, and then an X on Delta for dinghies. Then the last section that we have here is aircraft color and markings. The aircraft color and markings, you just simply stipulate what it is: white with blue stripes or white with black stripes. Then under remarks, you can put in first aid kit and strips. So first aid kits, very handy to have, must have. Your strips, as in if you do crash land, survive, but you're in the middle of nowhere, then you've got some strips which you can put as an X, just to indicate to other pilots flying in the vicinity to say, hey, this plane has crashed. Okay, so that's a first aid kit and strips. And then you can also put in under remarks, I have just completely forgotten. But you would also actually put in water as well. Put in water is very handy. And then there's one more thing that you should actually put in under remarks as well. Just left me. I'm doing this quite late, so forgive me. Then the last thing is pilot in command. Just put in your name, your initial, first name, initial, and then also the surname. I think what I'll do is I'll actually put in the comment section the other item that I had left out for remarks, because it is important to have. Okay, good. Great. So that's pretty much it. That is a flight plan. You will say all of this by phone. Once you have said all this information, they'll tell you to stand by for your flight plan reference number. Your flight plan reference number, for example, they would say is 1049. Okay, great. You make note of that because when you do make initial contact with air traffic control tower, ground frequency, for example, then you could provide the flight plan reference number and they can find it and say, oh, yes, you did say you're going to be leaving. What are the other conditions? The other conditions are that you must, you can file a flight plan 5 days in advance, up to 30 minutes before the flight. And then you can do what? Once it is filed, then it is valid for 1 hour after the estimated departure time. Thereafter, you'd have to refile, or you could amend the current flight plan if you just catch it on the hour, if you know what I mean. And that's, I would say, that is it. So that's it. Thank you very much, guys, for joining in. If you have any more questions on it, just let me know in the comment section below. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.
Let's go. Yo, I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, gotta